Good morning again.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be here. This morning I want to explore a number of some sections in Genesis. It's in relation to forgiveness, and I want to focus on the family through which the Messiah was to come. I'll be looking at Isaac's family down to Jacob and his family, and we can learn some things from that. It's maybe more like a Bible study than a sermon. Anyway, let's see. There are various questions people think about it regarding forgiveness. Do you find it easy to forgive and that sort of thing? And the fact that Jesus tells us that in the Lord's Prayer, for example, we ask for forgiveness as we forgive others and so forth. And then there's the stipulation, of course, about repentance. Can you forgive if there's no repentance? So if we turn to Genesis 25, it's amazing the things that we sometimes never think about when we're reading the Old Testament, especially in the early days of Genesis and so forth. Let's see. Of course, remember God called Abraham and told him that through his seed all human beings would be blessed, and that was referring to Jesus Christ. And then, of course, Sarah had a son at long last, after sort of hearing God himself saying, "This time next year I give you a son," and her laughing to herself and coming out and saying, "Oh, I didn't laugh." "Oh, yes, you did laugh." But then, of course, Isaac married Rebekah. You remember Abraham sent his servant. I'm not going to turn to every scripture. Abraham sent his servant to find a wife from his people in Haran. So he came back, he found that woman, came back, and we remember sometimes you hear the expression, "the camels are coming." The camels are coming. Because Rebekah saw Isaac in the field approaching, and she alighted from the camel, and they met, of course, and married. And Rebekah wasn't able to have children, and Isaac beseeched God for her that she would, and she did. She had children, and in verse 23 here of chapter 25, we'll go back a verse or two before that. In 21, Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, she didn't know there were two babies, of course, in her womb. And she said, "If all is well, why am I this way?" There must have been a lot of kicking going on. So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two people shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the other shall serve the younger." And she gave birth, of course, and there were twins. And one was hairy and one was smooth, Esau and Jacob. But God told Rebekah that the younger would serve, the younger would rule the elder. And obviously Joseph are getting mixed up with so many names in this family when you start talking about them. Jacob would rule over Esau, really, and no doubt she told him that. But God chooses the line, of course, here through which the Messiah will come, and it's through Isaac and his children, one of his children. And we can see in these verses a fatal weakness in both parents. We just go down here a wee bit. Verse 27, the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game. Esau was a practical doer, going out hunting and that type of thing. But Rebekah loved Jacob. You see, favoritism was entering here. The father loved Esau, Isaac loved Esau. Great man, look at the game he comes in with. There he's coming with a deer over his shoulder, and he would enjoy that. So we see that a fatal weakness, favoritism. In verse 29, we did, let's see, verse 29. Yes, Jacob was cooking a stew, of course, and Esau came in from the field, and he was bone tired. So Esau said to Jacob, verse 30, please feed me with the same red stew, for I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright. Now why would Jacob even have thought of that if he hadn't been told by his mother that really the birthright was his? She loved him, you see, more than she loved Esau. And so he wanted this birthright. And he said to Esau, well, you sell it to me and I'll give you some of this red stew. And that's what happened. Esau said, look, I'm about to die. So what profit shall this birthright be to me? Then Jacob said, swear to me as of this day. So he swore and sold his birthright to Jacob. So it showed Jacob, or Esau, despised his birthright. He didn't count it of any importance. Didn't count it of any importance. We're in chapter 27. Chapter 27. It came to pass, verse 1, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he couldn't see, that he called Esau his older son and said to him, my son. And he answered, here I am. And he said, behold now, I am old, I don't know the day of my death. Now therefore please take your weapons, your quiver, your bow, go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savoury food, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, here is Rebekah in the next verse. This is a lady with her ear to the ground in her household. Anything that happened, she knew about it. Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt game and bring it in. What did Rebekah do? Jacob immediately called Jacob. She spoke to Jacob and said, indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game. Make savoury food for me that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. He listened to his mother. She told him what to do. Go to the flock, bring 2 choice kids of the goats. I'll make savoury food from them for your father, such as she loves. Who would know what her husband loves more than his wife? So she was going to cook this up. Then you'll take it to your father that he may eat it, and he may bless you before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, look, Esau my brother is a hairy man. I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself, and not a blessing. But his mother said, let your curse be on me. Imagine saying that. Let your curse be on me. Only obey my voice and go get them for me. And he went, and he got them, of course. And he was going to impersonate his brother. He went and got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savoury food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son. Now, she was a smart lady. She knew that Esau's clothing would smell differently from Jacob's. And she dressed Jacob up in Esau's clothes. And she took the choice clothes, put them on Jacob, her younger son, and she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. She gave him the savoury food, the bread which she had prepared, into the hand of her son. So he went to his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Now, Isaac, he couldn't see very well. But he was sharp enough, he could hear, and he knew it wasn't Esau's voice. It wasn't Esau's voice. And Jacob said, I'm Esau, your firstborn. Imagine having the brass neck to go in those circumstances to your father and saying, I'm Esau. And you weren't trying to imitate his voice or anything. In your own voice, I am Esau. I am Esau. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? Here was a man who hadn't lost his marbles, really, yet. And of course, Jacob said, because the Lord God brought it to me. And Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you really are my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he didn't recognize him because his hands were hairy and like his brother Esau. So he blessed him. And he said, are you really my son Esau? And he said, I am. There he is asking this again. Big doubt was in Isaac's mind, but he had blessed Jacob. Or he was about to. He said, bring it near to me and I will eat of my son's game so that my soul may bless you. So he brought it near, he ate, and he brought him wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him. And he blessed him then. Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore, my God, may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. Then it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau came in from his hunting. Now Esau came in, I don't need to read all the verses, and was brought in after cooking the venison and that, and only to be told that there was no blessing for him. No blessing. The blessing of the elder was not for him. And Jacob did say, or Isaac rather, his father Isaac said in verse 32, who are you? And he said, I am your son, your firstborn. And Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. And Esau really got angry. How would you feel if you were in that situation? Your brother had really did the dirty. See, Jacob knew that he was to be the one to get the blessing. And he wanted it so much that he would do anything to get it. And he fell in with his mother's suggestions. But God could have given him that and would have given it to him without him deceiving his father. He would have got a blessing. He would have been the one anyway. But instead of that, and we see that in this world now, people will do anything for position and do anything to hold on to power. If you have somebody in power and they enjoy exercising power, they'll not be easy to get rid of. They want to hold on to it. Or if they're making a lot of money and they have a nice little thing going whereby there's a lot of revenue coming into their bank account, they don't want that to stop. And here Jacob had done wrong to get what he thought was his by right. And it was going to be his. But he did the wrong thing to get it. And we see that reflected in our society all the time. We can ask ourselves, do we do that? Would we go to any lengths to secure a position? Mr. Katz was talking about women and men and so forth, and some people did really covet the position of a minister. And it isn't one, a lot of these people didn't know what it really entailed, and afterwards they found a heavy burden, a very heavy burden. But anyway, Jacob had got the blessing, and then let's see now where we are here. Yes, verse 41, Esau hated Jacob. This is the same chapter 27, because of the blessing And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, and I will kill my brother Jacob. You can understand the strong feeling of anger that burned here, of resentment. Resentment's a terrible thing. If you carry resentment inside, it really eats away at you. It really does. The words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. Here is the matriarch again, very much kept in touch with what people were saying and talking about in her home. So she called Jacob and said, surely Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Orion, flee to my brother Laban in Haran. And she goes to Isaac and says, I'm really very annoyed. I'm depressed about the fact that Jacob could marry one of these Canaanitish women. And he really shouldn't be doing that. And Isaac agreed and said, right, we'll send him off to Haran. But you see the cunning here in Rebekah. She knew the way to get Jacob to go was to get it through Isaac. She didn't send him on her own, but she was working that all out. There was a lot of cunning there, and she was a good person in many ways, Rebekah. I mean, she was chosen, and she was part of the line through which Messiah would come, and so forth. So Jacob fled to Haran, to her family, to take a wife. And in chapter 29, let's see. Yes, he arrived and he went on his journey, verse 1. He looked and saw a well in the field, and there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, and a large stone was in the well's mouth. And Jacob asked the men there, my brethren, where are you from? And they said, we're from Haran. And he said, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, we know him. So he said, is he well? And they said, he is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. And he said, look, it's still high day. Is it not time for the cattle to be gathered? Water the sheep, go and feed them. But they said, we can't do that until all the flocks are gathered. And while he was speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And he told Rachel that he was her father's relative, and she ran and told her father. And of course Laban ran out, greeted him and all that. And Laban wanted to use him, to get him to work for him and use him. And of course, it says verse 16, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, or as it says in the margin, it can be translated, or weak. But Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. So here was a beauty. And of course, Jacob fell head over heels for Rachel. And he loved her and desired her. Laban said, it's better I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Now here was one deceiver talking to another deceiver. Laban. So he said, stay with me. He wanted Jacob to work with him. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and it seemed but a few days to him because of the love he had for her. He really desired her. And men, when you see the lady that you want to marry, and there's that attraction and chemistry and so forth, you do have that strong desire. You really do have that strong desire. And that's the way Jacob felt. He would have done anything. So, verse 20, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Imagine serving 7 years. And they seemed but a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Now that was some love that he had for Rachel. And she was a beauty. Not just in her features, but her figure and all the rest of it. So after the 7 years, Jacob said, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her." And Laban gathered all the men of the place, made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening he took... Now, remember Leah was plain, and it was the custom at that time that the elder daughter would be married first. And Rachel wasn't the elder daughter. And so Jacob was desiring his wife. He had served 7 years for her. It didn't seem long. He knew, so the wedding was being arranged and organised, and there was the feast. It must have been some feast. There must have been a lot of the hard stuff there, I would say. Because when the evening came after all the festivities and the eating and drinking, it was Leah that was brought to the bridal chamber, not Rachel. Leah. Leah, the plain girl, but the eldest girl. And Jacob must have been in quite a state, and he didn't know it was Leah. But he spent the night with the one he didn't really want to be his wife. So imagine now that happening. I mean, surely you would know in some way that it wasn't the lady you wanted to marry. I mean, if William there, if somebody else had been walked up the aisle, we would have known right away. But in those days, the feast and the bride didn't seem to be a part of that. She was brought in later. Jacob, there's a man who deceived his father, and he is now deceived. What does it say? With the measure you meet, it will be measured to you again. Shaken down, running over. That happened to Jacob. That happened to Jacob. So, verse 23, Jacob did sleep with Leah, all right. It came to pass in the evening, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went in to her. And Jacob didn't, in the morning, Jacob knew he must have had quite a hangover. Must have had quite a hangover. It's hard to understand that. So Jacob, he had to serve another 7 years for Rachel, but he was able to take her as his wife in a week, within a week of marrying Leah. He only had to serve a week. And verse 31. Verse 31. Yes, Jacob obviously didn't love Leah, but he loved Rachel. And in verse 31, it's, God noticed that Leah was unloved. Of course, God knew what Jacob was about and what he was like and all the rest of it. When the Lord saw Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, and Rachel, she was barren and not having children. So Leah conceived and bore a son and called his name Reuben. So here was Leah. God blessed her because she wasn't loved by Jacob. And then she had Reuben, the firstborn, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, those four. And she brought her maid and gave her to Jacob as well. And the maid had 2 children to Jacob. So there were 6. And eventually, Rachel, God listened to Jacob, and he opened Rachel's womb, and she bore Joseph and Benjamin. Of course, she died in childbirth. But Jacob worked for Laban, or Laban, still worked for him for quite a number of years. And in Genesis 31, verses 1 to 2, Jacob, during this time, had become quite rich in livestock and all the rest of it. And in Genesis 31, we find that matters are becoming fraught between Jacob and Laban. And we read here, Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. And from what was our father's, he has acquired all this wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favourable to him as before. This is a sort of reading people's faces. It's like the boss coming in, and he's usually friendly to you and delighted with what you're doing. And one morning he comes in, and there's a downward look. You know, he's not looking you in the eye. He's a stiff sort of expression on his face. And you would say, like Jacob did, his what does it say? his countenance was not favourable to me as before. Jacob realised, something was happening here. He wasn't in favour anymore. So the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your kindred, and I will be with you. And Jacob called his wives Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and said again here, I see your father's countenance, that it's not favourable to me as before. But the God of my father has been with me, and you know that with all my might I've served your father. And Jacob did, he worked really hard, and the flock increased. Everything increased and was blessed that Jacob did. And Laban, during his time, changed Jacob's wages, I think 10 times, it said. And let's see now. What will Jacob do? Well, Jacob actually does a midnight flit. You hear of people doing midnight flits. They owe a lot of money. They decide it's time to get out of town and they hit the trail. Well, God had told him to go back into the land that would be given to him. And let's see. Yes, verse 20 of 31. Jacob stole away, unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So this really was a midnight flit. And he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river and headed towards the mountains of Gilead. And then, of course, Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. And he took his brethren and pursued for 7 days and overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban was not best pleased, as you can imagine. Eventually, they had a long discussion when Laban was trying to get it across to Jacob, but everything Jacob had was his anyway. And he shouldn't have ran away, he should have talked to him and told him. But they made a covenant with each other that they wouldn't harm one another or seek to do anything wrong against each other. In verse 22, we did read that, he was told. Jacob, now let's see, Genesis 32. Genesis 32. And in verse, let's see. Jacob, in going back to Canaan, knew that he would be meeting Esau, because Esau was there. And he sent messengers on to tell Esau, and he put his herds across the river, and his wives across the river, and their handmaids with their children. He got them all to cross the river, and he was left alone. And in verse 22 of chapter 32, we read, well, first of all, in verse 11, verse 9, Jacob prays, and he says, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, and I will deal with you, well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. So he was going, he knew he was going to have to meet Esau anyway, and he was praying for God to help him, because he knew, remembering his conscience was at him, and he remembered what he had done. And he didn't feel good, he didn't feel good. So he, as I said, his family and all crossed, and he was left on his own. And in verse 22, he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. And he took them, sent them over the brook, and sent them over with all that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And this was actually God who wrestled with him. And in the Tate Modern in London, there's a sculpture of Jacob wrestling with an angel. And it's interesting, his arms are around, their arms are around each other, but God is holding Jacob. They wrestled all night, and God is actually supporting him. And Jacob doesn't realize that. Jacob thinks he's winning and holding his own and all the rest of it. And he won't let God go, of course, until he blessed him. Let's see. A man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip went out of joint as he wrestled. But he still hung on. Now, maybe Epstein, who was the sculptor, was picturing Jacob after God had touched the sinew, and he was limp now, he couldn't get the same power in his leg. And Jacob wouldn't let go anyway, and maybe that's where God was supporting Jacob still. I will not let you go unless you bless me. And God said in verse 28, he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob but Israel. You have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. And he asked God's name, but God didn't tell him his name. Tell me your name, I pray. He said, why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name Peniel, for I have seen God face to face and my life is preserved. So God appeared as he did appear to Abraham, remember? And it was Jesus Christ, actually, not the Father, as we know. So Jacob makes peace with Esau. We don't need to go into that. And he settles in Bethel. And he dwelt in the land of Canaan, the land that God told him to go back to. And his family, of course, was a dysfunctional one. Take Judah, one of Leah's sons. He didn't receive much love from his father. Neither did Reuben nor Levi. Because a young person senses if there's warmth and love between father and mother. They sense that. Judah didn't sense that. He didn't sense it at all. And they noticed the difference between how Jacob treated Joseph and Benjamin. They noticed that. And so the atmosphere between their parents wasn't great. It wasn't great at all. It was the same with the other sons who were born to the maids, to Leah's maid. Whereas Rachel's were loved, and of course more affection was shown. Jacob really showed affection to Joseph, and he made him that very beautiful coat in many colours, which Joseph wore. And the other sons noticed this, of course. And in Genesis, remember in Isaac's family, favoritism. Look what it caused. Look what it caused. Genesis 37. And let's see. Verse 2. This is the genealogy of Jacob. Joseph, that was Rachel's firstborn, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. So I suppose they were saying to him, there's telltale coming, you know. He tells Dad everything, and so forth. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colours. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and couldn't speak peaceably to him. Now it's like somebody getting bullied at school, you know. They were all down on Joseph because Jacob was showing favouritism, and which he shouldn't have done. He shouldn't have done. So Joseph did bring these bad reports, and he wore the coat of many colours. Of course, it was made for him, and the brothers hated him. And then in verse 2 of, let's see. Oh no, sorry, it's not verse 2. Yes, verse 5. Now Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field, Behold, my sheep arose and also stood up. Your sheep stood all around and bowed down to my sheep. His brother said, shall you indeed reign over us? Now this wasn't helping matters. Joseph was sort of crowing and boasting a bit. So they weren't happy about that. He dreamed another dream, verse 9, and told it to his brothers and said, look, I dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me. And he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Yes, then in verse 14, you can see the atmosphere here and the feelings between the brothers and Joseph. Verse 14, he said, please go and see if it's well with your brothers and the flocks, and bring back word. So that he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and went to Shechem. And Joseph had some difficulty finding them. In verse 15, a man found him and told him where they were. Asked him who he was seeking, and he said, they have departed from here, they're in Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And verse 18, now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Now, what sort of feelings did they have? The feelings we were talking about. Resentment, anger. They would teach him a lesson. You know, there are sometimes, maybe you buy something and it's touted up, set up as a great bargain, and that lasts you for years. You buy it. And you bring it home and you show it to your friends and they say, what, I saw that down so-and-so's and it only cost half that. They saw you coming. They saw Joseph coming here. They saw Joseph coming. They said, look, this dreamer's coming. Let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. Now this had really gone deep into the brothers' hearts, this fact that Joseph was really loved. Really gone deep. When Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands. Let us not kill him. They put him in a pit, as we know. And when he came, they stripped him of his coat, in verse 23. They stripped him of his tunic, and then they took him and cast him into the pit. And the pit was empty, no water in it. And they sat down then to eat. And they looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites were coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, myrrh, and on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to the brothers, what profit is there if we kill him, our brother, and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be on him, for he is our brother and our flesh. Really? What they're going to do to him wouldn't say that he was their brother. And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So there was Joseph, sold as a slave, and brought away down to Egypt. And he was sold, as we know. Reuben came back, of course, and too late. He wasn't there when he really should have been. And Joseph was gone. He wasn't able to do anything. The brothers took Joseph's coat, they dipped it in the blood of a goat, and brought it to Jacob. And let's see, the same chapter and verse 30. He returned to his brothers, this is Reuben, he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more, where shall I go? So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, dipped it in the blood of a goat it was. Then they took the tunic, brought it to their father and said, we have found this, do you know whether it's your son's tunic or not? Imagine doing that. You know, it's hard to believe, but You know, human nature was alive and well in those days too, and it's more so now. More so now. He recognized it and said, "It's my son's tunic, a wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn in pieces." Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned many days for his son. And all his sons rose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "For I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning." And thus his father wept for him. And of course, that was a cruel thing. That was a very cruel thing to do. Really was. And we do find in some of these narratives here, we find that garments and personal items are presented as evidence on a number of occasions. As evidence. Take Judah. We don't need to read the scripture. Remember, he had taken a wife for his son, one of his sons, and that son died. God killed him because he was wicked. And then the other son was told to go in and take the wife Tamar, and so that she would have a child to take over the line. He went in and God killed him too, because he didn't want to father a child for his brother. He didn't want to do that. And then Judah promised that his third son would be given to Tamar as a husband. It didn't happen. Time passed. Shua, I think was the name of the third son, grew up, but he wasn't given to Tamar. So Tamar decided to take matters into her own hands. She knew Judah was coming down where they were shearing sheep, and she dressed up as a prostitute. She put a veil over her head, and Judah came down and saw her and wanted her. So he went in to have sexual relations with her, and she said he's promised her he would send her a kid of a goat. And she said, "What will you give me as a pledge?" Now, if that had been these days, she'd have wanted his credit cards. But she asked for his signet, his staff, and the cord, which he gave her. And then when he came back with the goat, she wasn't there. She wasn't there. And he said, well, he went sort of his way, but see, those things were given as a pledge in those days. Something that you own, personal belonging, especially a signet, would have been very important. And there was a danger here, actually, that the line to the Messiah could have been broken. Because one of Judah's sons had to marry Tamar for that line to continue. So Judah became the father, one of the ancestors of the Messiah. And of course he didn't have any further contact with Tamar, but Tamar, she bore the child. It does show how God works out his purposes no matter what human beings are doing. You decide, say he has a purpose to work out and you're involved in it. Now, no matter what you do, he will work the purpose out through you. You can't stop God's will. You can't negate it. God will work it out. And he did that, and there's many examples of that in the scriptures. The line to the Messiah was maintained here. And it does show how God works things out. And of course, Judah exercised free choice. God didn't force him. God wouldn't have forced him to do wrong anyway. God didn't force him. So in Genesis 39, Joseph was bought by Potiphar, and an official high up in Pharaoh's court, and the Lord was with him. Now, I'm not going to read a lot because time is going on. Joseph was put in charge, actually, of Potiphar's house when he saw that. He saw the talents and abilities Joseph had, and God was blessing him. And he put him in charge of the entire house. And of course, Potiphar has a beautiful wife. And she wants to sleep with Joseph. And she tries to tempt him. Joseph refuses always to do this. And finally, she came and she really was trying to force him. No one was in the house but Joseph and her. She tried to force him to sleep with her. And Joseph had to flee out of the house. And he left his garment behind. She in her hand. And when her husband came, of course, she accused Joseph of rape. and Joseph was bundled into prison. Just imagine, bundled into prison. Notice Psalm 105. Psalm 105 and verses 18 and 19. Well, we'll read actually from verse 16. It talks about, moreover, it's talking about what God was doing with Israel at this time. Verse 16, moreover, he called for a famine in the land. That's God. He destroyed all the provision of bread. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. Verse 18, they hurt his feet with fetters. When he came to Egypt, he wasn't treated like gently. It wasn't immediately that his talents were noticed. They hurt his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. And the word of the Lord tested him. Joseph was severely tested for a job that he was going to have to do. Yes, he was dumped into prison, but you know, the man in charge of the prison also saw the talent that Joseph had and the skill and the wisdom, and that God blessed him. And he put him in charge of the prison. It's like talking about the lunatics in charge of the asylum. But Joseph was a rare character, very rare, and he had been tested already. And now he was in prison, and of course, the butler and the baker were there too. They were thrown in. They had dreams, and the butler and the baker recounted them to Joseph, and God revealed to Joseph what the dreams meant. The butler would be restored to his position. The baker would lose his head. It happened. And of course the butler said, Joseph asked him, remember me, you know, when you're restored. Joseph knew he'd be restored to his position. The butler didn't remember him. So Joseph spent 2 more years in prison. And why did the butler forget? Would it have made any difference? Would it have made any difference? I'm turning back here to Genesis. Yes, in verse 20 of chapter 39, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. He was there. God was with him, of course, and the keeper of the prison, as I said, put everything under his control. And let's see, the butler and the baker dreamed their dreams, and he told them the interpretation, and so forth. Now, I'm trying to just catch a verse here. Yes, Pharaoh eventually had a dream in chapter 41, but why did God not release Joseph sooner? Joseph was being tested. If the butler had remembered Joseph earlier, there was no sign of any famine. Pharaoh hadn't dreamed his dream about a famine. If he had brought Joseph to him and said, this man interpreted my dream, Pharaoh wouldn't have wanted to hear him, because he wouldn't have been interested in a Hebrew, especially one who was in prison. But during the 2 years, God wanted to test Joseph. And during those 2 years, he tested him. Imagine waiting, knowing that you had done nothing worthy of the penalty you were suffering, and that the butler had forgotten to mention your name. But then Pharaoh had his dreams, remember? About the fat cattle being eaten up by the lean cattle, and also the other dream he had, the grain, plump and good, being devoured by the lean, the thin heads devoured the 7 plump. And of course then the butler remembered Joseph. And Joseph came and interpreted the dream for Pharaoh. And Pharaoh put him completely in charge of Egypt under him. Imagine You can see the training and the testing that God was putting Joseph through for that position. God sent him there to save life, to arrange things for the famine and all the rest of it. So Joseph was Lord of Egypt, organised everything for the famine, and Joseph's brothers arrived, wanting to buy grain. Genesis 42, Joseph's brother arrived. And he spoke to them roughly in verse 7. He saw his brothers, recognized them, he acted as a stranger and spoke roughly. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. They didn't recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams he had dreamed and said to them, "You're spies." And of course, in verse 6, just prior to the section we read there, Joseph was a governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. So there was the Joseph dream. He accused them of being spies. And of course, in verse 21, their consciences were beginning now to become very active. Verse 21. They said to one another, "We're truly guilty concerning our brother. We saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us that we wouldn't hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us." Yeah, God was working, and they began to connect their treatment of Joseph with what was happening. And Reuben, in verse 20, Reuben answered, saying, "Did I not speak to you, saying, 'Don't sin against the boy,' and you wouldn't listen? Behold, his blood is now required of us." And Joseph, of course, understood all they were talking about. And he had to go and weep in a private place, of course. He wept. He needed to see if anything had changed, and that's why he was speaking roughly to his brothers. He was delighted to see them. He loved them. He had went through an awful lot, and he realized, what family should be and so forth. But he needed to see if anything had changed. What was their attitude to Benjamin? So he wanted to see if there was repentance. And they were given a taste of prison. Simeon was they were put in prison for 3 days and then taken out again. And then he had Simeon bound, and Simeon was the hard man. Simeon and Levi are the ones who, you remember Dinah had been violated. And Simeon and Levi went and killed. First of all, they tricked the people who had been party to the raping of Dinah, that they needed to be circumcised, and then there would be one people. And when they were circumcised, Levi and Simeon went through the village and slew every one of the males. Slew every one of them and went their way. So he had Simeon bound and put in prison while the others returned to Canaan. And of course they had to bring Benjamin back. Simeon was in jail. So Jacob resisted their pleas to do this in chapter 43. You can read that. But finally yielded because food was becoming scarce. And Judah, he was to be the surety for Benjamin. And he said he would bear the blame forever. That's what Judah said. And they arrived in Egypt. They stood before Joseph in verse 15. Verse 15. So the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double their money in their hand and arose and went down to Egypt. They stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward, "Take these men to my home and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon." Verses 26 and 27. Joseph came home then to dine with his brothers. It's the same chapter 43. When Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he said, asked about their well-being and asked about their father, "Is the old man still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves down on the ground before him. He lifted his eyes and saw Benjamin and said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my boy, and my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother, and Joseph had to find somewhere to weep, so he went into his chamber and wept. You can see how he feels. How he feels. But then he sent them away with grain, and he put a silver cup into Benjamin's sack of grain. And he sent his servants after them, and the servants stopped them and said, "What way are you rewarding my master by stealing a silver cup? Do you not know he uses that to divine with?" And they searched the sacks. It was found in Benjamin's sack, and they all had to go back to Joseph. And chapter 44, verse 9. Let's see now. Yes, the servants overtook them, told them, they said, "Why does my Lord say these words? Far it be from us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever," listen to this, "with whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we also will be my Lord's slaves." And he said, "Now also let it be according to your words." He was testing them here, really testing them. "Let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blameless." Then they searched the sacks, beginning with the oldest, and left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said, "What deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination?" Judah said, "What shall we say, my lord? What shall we say? How shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my lord's slaves, both we and he also with whom the cup was found." But he said, "Far be it from me that I should do so. But the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my slave." And of course it was Benjamin. And then Judah came and pleaded and sort of said, "Look, this boy Benjamin is so loved by his father that if we don't bring him back, he will die." Judah said that Judah was to be, remember, he was to be guarantor for Benjamin. And he offered himself as a slave. And Joseph saw a complete change of attitude in Judah and in the brothers. They cared for Benjamin. They cared for Benjamin. Judah was saying, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age who is young. His brother's dead, and he alone is left with his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down, that I may see him." And we said, "The lad can't leave his father. If he should leave, his father would die." But you said, "Unless he comes, you won't see me again." So it was when we went up to your servant that we told him your words, and our father said, "Go and buy food." And of course, let's see. Yes, Jacob said to them, "Look, if you take this one also from me," verse 29, "and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my grey hair with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen, when he sees that the lad is not there, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the grey hair of your servant, our father, to the grave." For now Judah is talking here. "Your servant became surety for the lad. If I don't bring him back, then I shall bear the blame forever. Therefore, please let your servant remain." Judah was offering himself. "Let me remain instead of the lad. How shall I go to my father if the lad is not with me?" And of course, this was a terrible strain on Joseph, and he He made everyone go out except his brothers, and he broke down and crying and weeping, and he made himself known to his brothers. And he forgave his brothers because he saw their repentance. He saw the change in attitude. You see, let's see now. Chapter 45, yeah. Verse 1, Joseph couldn't restrain himself before all those who stood by him. And he made them go out, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians heard it. And Joseph said, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? But his brothers couldn't answer him, for they were dismayed at his prayer. Imagine someone you thought was dead by now, and out of the way, there he was in front of you. What would you feel like? And Joseph forgave them. Joseph said, please come near to me. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. As we read in 105, Psalm 105, God sent him. And notice I'll try and wrap this up quickly, in chapter 50, after Jacob did die and had blessed the sons and so forth, they began to be a bit fearful that Joseph would change his mind. And they said, let's see now. Joseph reassures you. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us and may repay us for all the evil we did. So they said to Joseph, saying, that thus shall you say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke. And they went and fell down before him, and Joseph said, don't be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is today, to save many people alive. Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And of course, in Luke 17, Joseph forgave. But notice he wanted to see there was repentance. He tested them. And in Luke 17, and to conclude here so as not to go on too, I've gone on longer than I intended actually. Luke 17, it is quite a riveting story. And where are we? 3 and 4. We'll read from verse 1. Then he said to the disciples, it's impossible that no offences should come, but woe to him through whom they come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung round his neck and he was thrown into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. Take heed to yourselves. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him. And notice, if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times returns to you saying, I repent, you shall forgive him. And remember, we are to forgive. We kneel down and we say, Father, forgive me, as I forgive others. Not an easy thing.